So UFC 265 is coming soon. It's actually just around the corner in August, and we don't have much time left before this card needs to be made and finalized. And so far, the main event of UFC 265 is Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena. That's not okay. Not on my watch. Not ever will I allow and sit back whilst Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena headlines a pay-per-view. We need to immediately save this card. I've got the main event over here, the co-main event over there, the main card of the pay-per-view below me in the first row. Below that, we've got the prelims, and in the bottom row are the early prelims. It's time for a UFC card builder for UFC 265. And so far on screen, I've already got the foundations for a good pay-per-view. These are the fights that have been made so far. Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena, which I believe should be on the feature fight. I think we can really make a great card here, so let's put this all the way down at the feature fight, because it brings no value to the card whatsoever at all. No one cares. Other than that, you've got Uriah Hall versus Sean Strickland, which I believe is good enough to open up the main card, in my opinion. You've also got the early prelim fights that have been made so far, the bantamweight bouts. You've got Draco Rodriguez versus Vince Morales. And down in the corner, you've got Johnny Munoz Jr. versus Jamie Simmons. Let's talk about the main event over here to begin with. I feel like everyone kind of knows who the main event's going to be here, because we've kind of been teased that he will be returning very soon. It needs to be the big man himself, Francis Ngannou, in the heavyweight division. I need to see Ngannou back in action. He's got a bunch of hype right now. Let's keep the ball rolling, keep momentum rolling. But who will his opponent be? Now, I know Jon Jones really badly wants to take on Ngannou. I completely understand just how desperate Jon Jones is to take on Francis Ngannou. Like, he wants it so badly. Jon Jones wants the Francis Ngannou fight so badly at heavyweight that he vacated his belt at light heavyweight to make sure that he didn't have any negotiations in terms of if he can hold up a division while negotiating for more money for a heavyweight bout. He took years away from the sport, which made his name completely irrelevant in the sport and allowed the light heavyweight division to move on without him. He also left his management team of an entire decade just in the middle of negotiations with Francis Ngannou, which really does set things back massively, but that's just how much Jon Jones wants to take on Francis Ngannou. Jon Jones asked for $30 million purely because of how much he wants to take on Ngannou, despite the fact, even though he asked for $30 million, he asked for $30 million, despite the fact that his last two pay-per-views have not been released in terms of how much they sold, because of how embarrassingly low the numbers are, because of how much of a draw Jon Jones is not at the moment. Jon Jones has not made a person say wow in about 5 years, maybe around since USADA came along. Either way, Ngannou's got to move on with a new opponent. And I think that new opponent needs to be a man named Derrick Lewis. I need the rematch. I know this is not greatly anticipated because the first fight was amazing. Like, I was on the edge of my seat in the first fight the entire time. Now, that mainly was because I was in the middle of falling off of my seat while completely unconscious asleep. Either way, I was on the edge of my seat during the first fight. I need to see the rematch. I think this can be marketed as a fight where the rematch, you can... Normally with rematches, you see the first fight, it's amazing, you want a rematch. They say the rematch is going to be better. You don't know. This is maybe the first rematch in history where I can 100% guarantee you this fight will be better than the first one. Because nothing can be fucking worse than the first one. Either way, Derrick Lewis, Francis Ngannou. Derrick Lewis, his name in the press right now is likewise to his testicles. It's hot in the press right now. Really hot in the press. He got his car stolen. He's been at press conferences. He crashed Lando Venata's press conference, and that has something like 500,000 views. Derrick Lewis versus Francis Ngannou 2 needs to happen. Derrick Lewis beat him, and Derrick Lewis is the #1 contender right now after KOing Curtis Blades. I think we need to see Ngannou versus Lewis 2 in the meantime while Jon Jones figures out how to make it more difficult for him to get the Ngannou fight whilst really badly wanting it. So let's do Ngannou versus Lewis 2 in the meantime, moving on to the co-main event over this side of the screen, which I believe needs to be. And I've got it right here. I love this co-main event, okay? It's Mr. Colby Covington versus Kamaru Usman The rematch we've all been waiting for. Now, I know I joked about the fight on the left or the right of your screen, either way, of Ngannou versus Lewis being a rematch we've all been waiting for. This one actually is the rematch everyone is waiting for. There is no other man in the welterweight division that has a potential chance of beating Kamaru Usman other than Colby Covington. People typically don't win rounds against Kamaru Usman, and Colby won a round with his jaw hanging off against Kamaru Usman. I need to see that fight made again. I know that Colby Covington is not beating a bunch of contenders, and he's not on a massive streak right now, coming back towards the belt like a guy like Robert Whittaker right now. Either way, Usman said he wants to be active until they mentioned Colby Covington, in which case he doesn't want to be active anymore, because he was more than willing to step in against like a Leon Edwards or a Michael Chiesa in June and stay active as a champion. Then they mentioned Colby Covington's name, and all of a sudden Usman's not ready to be so active anymore. Maybe Usman doesn't want the fight, but he's not ducking Covington. I'm not one of those dumb people. I watched Usman finish Covington in the 5th round and break his jaw. I'm not stupid. Usman would happily fight Covington, I'm sure, but there's very easier matchups in that welterweight division that aren't named Colby Covington, that don't bring the mental warfare that Colby Covington does. And I think Usman just doesn't want the heat of a Covington fight right now, maybe. I need to see the fight again. I think Usman would beat him, but I need that fight to be made again. Look at this card so far. Do I need to continue this video? Look at this card so far. Ngannou Lewis 2. Usman Covington 2. Nunes Pena. Whatever, you know what I mean? It's on the card. Uriah Hall, Sean Strickland. I need one little bit of sprinkling to finish off that main card, and you've got yourself an amazing pay-per-view, and it's so possible to be done. All of these guys are ready to go in August. You don't have to pay them that much. They don't get paid that much. This card is so possibly made. I can't believe it, so I'm going to sprinkle on my little bit of magic on this main card. And I think it needs to be Frankie Edgar versus the man himself over here, who is Dominic the Dominator Cruz. On the main card, Frankie Edgar, Dominic Cruz. Look at that main card. Am I wrong? Frankie Edgar, Dominic Cruz, 2 old veterans. I don't like the idea of always sacrificing veterans to young up-and-comers, like we've seen that with Sandhagen versus Edgar. I know Sandhagen's not really a young guy anymore, but still he was a streaking contender in the bantamweight division, and Edgar was kind of thrown to him as like a big jump-up fight to get Sandhagen some notoriety. Either way, Dominic Cruz also had that fight against Casey Kenny. Let's start rewarding these veterans for taking on these dangerous contenders. Dominic Cruz versus Frankie Edgar. Let's make a real legendary fight on the card. I love that matchup. I really do. I can imagine the build-up already. It doesn't even need shit-talking from Dominic Cruz. That fight, just based on name value, sells itself. Put it on the main card. Moving on to the prelims of the card. Now, prelims can make or break a pay-per-view card, okay? Because what you need, first of all, and my matchmaking expertise is here. Sean Shelby, if you're watching this video, give me a ring, okay? I need a job real quick. I can do this shit for you. Either way, the prelims needs a backup for the main card. That's what the prelim truly needs. It needs a headliner. It needs a great fight. It needs a great opener. It needs a backup for the main card. The headliner for the prelims, in my opinion, should be Mr. Carlos Condit versus Mr. Robert Lawler, in my opinion. The Ruthless Once, as I like to call him, Robbie Lawler, because no more is he ruthless. Either way, Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit 2. The rematch. I need to see this. Look at the theme I'm going for here, guys, okay? Ngannou Lewis 2, the rematch. We need to see it. Usman Covington 2, the rematch. We need to see it. Then sprinkled in on the prelims to match the theme of the whole card and the promotability of the card, Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit 2, the rematch. We all know... Listen, I'm one of those guys that think Carlos Condit won the first fight against Robbie Lawler, because I'm also one of those guys with eyes and a brain and an idea of how to score fights. So obviously I thought Carlos Condit beat Robbie Lawler in their first fight. Either way, let's make the rematch another great veterans fight. And this is, again, one of those fights, as I said just a second ago. If anything happens to any fight on the main card, that can go up on the main card easily. The name value's there. Fan favourites, both of them. Great legend fight. Maybe it'll be a retirement fight for both. That would be amazing. Imagine if it ends in a draw. They both get their hand raised and they both retire together in a war. That'd be amazing to me. So I want to see Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit to headline the prelims. Moving on to the co-main event of the prelims, which is Merab Dvalishvili versus his opponent, which I believe should be Mr. Jimmy Rivera. A great bantamweight scrap. I've also got a backup here for the bantamweight fight on the main card, so if anything happens to the bantamweight fight on the main card, you can always promise a Merab, like, hey, if Edgar falls out and Cruz still wants to go, we might shimmy you up the card and find a replacement for Rivera. I think let's make Merab Dvalishvili versus Jimmy Rivera on the prelims. It can take the spot of the headliner of the prelims if Lawler and Condit are needed to go up to the main card. Amazing fight to make. I also like the matchup in general, to be honest with you guys, because we haven't really seen Merab face a good grappler other than Ricky Simone, and he lost that fight. Even though it was a bit controversial at the end, Ricky Simone gave him a lot of problems in that fight. I think could have secured the second round of that fight as well, and even made him go a little bit unconscious at the end of the fight, regardless of how you feel about the referee's decision of what he called it as a TKO. Merab Dvalishvili versus Jimmy Rivera. I need to see the fight made. Merab, Jimmy, both guys need to go right now. Keep the momentum going in their own division. Jimmy Rivera's had a bit of time off since the Pedro Munoz fight. He's recently looking to bounce back against a guy like Merab. I like Jimmy Rivera's takedown defense. I like his stand-up. I like his cardio. I like his toughness. I want to see if Merab can take him out. Let's make that fight on the co-main event of the prelims. Moving on to another fight on the prelims, which is a fight by the name of Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Mr. Boss-Eye himself, Marcin Prachnio. I think this fight needs to be made on the prelims as well. Great matchup in the light heavyweight division. I always like to vary the size of the people, because I feel like when you vary the size of a card, and you don't just have a bunch of bantamweights, then a bunch of welterweights, then a bunch of this, you get a much more appreciative feel of the fight that's coming next. When you watch flyweights, they're so fast. When you watch a heavyweight afterwards, it's like, oh, something crazy is about to happen. When you watch the heavyweights, then you go to a flyweight bout, it's like, whoa, it's so quick. I like the dips and flows of a card. Like it's such a weird way of building a card, but I just like going high to low to high to low. So I like the bantamweight, the welterweight to bantamweight to light heavyweight. Kennedy Nzechukwu coming off a big win against Carlos Ulberg. Marcin Prachnio coming off a win against Khalil Roundtree. I know a lot of people thought that was a robbery, but he outlanded Khalil Roundtree pretty much every round, so it wasn't really a robbery. It was a bit of a close decision that some people disagreed with. Either way, Nzechukwu versus Marcin Prachnio, and to open up the prelims of this event, I've got a very special fight. It's Darrick Minner, okay? But wait for it, okay? But wait for it. It's not just Darrick Minner, okay? Because that would be a real letdown. It's Darrick Minner versus a man they call Air Jourdain. Charles Jourdain himself. To open up the prelims of UFC 265, Darrick Minner, Charles Jourdain, great matchup. I know people saying, what are you doing giving Charles Jourdain Darrick Minner? Darrick Minner's higher ranked than Charles Jourdain. He's got a better UFC record than Charles Jourdain. He's on a better win streak than Charles Jourdain. I mean, Darrick Minner's 2-1 in the UFC, lost his debut to Grant Dawson. He's won 2 fights back-to-back since then and looked pretty good in those fights as well. Charles Jourdain is 2-1 in the UFC. I think both guys need one more fight each other. One more fight for each of them. Then the winner of that one can start looking for the big names like the Andre Phillies, maybe in a rematch for Jourdain, or a fresh fight for Darrick Minner, or a Cub Swanson. One of those big names that's just outside the rankings. The winner of that one can get that bout, but I think Darrick Minner versus Charles Jourdain should be made. Moving on to the headline of the early prelims, which I believe should be Mallory Martin versus Kay Hansen. I don't know why, but they both have a lot of followers, especially Kay Hansen, so let's make them the headliner of the early prelims, I guess. I think that's what we should do. Great matchup to make. Both girls coming off a loss in the women's strawweight division. They need a bounce-back opponent. Let's put them against each other to ensure that one of them stays in the UFC and we can build them as a star in themselves. I don't even think Kay Hansen lost her last fight against Jin Yu Frey, or it wasn't even against Jin Yu Frey. It was against some random Irish girl that I can't remember the name of. McCann, something like that. I can't remember it. It's not Molly McCann. I'm not saying that. I know who it is. I just can't think of the name right now. McKee. It's one of those names. You know what I'm saying? I know who it is. It's Mook something. Fucking Mooks. Either way, moving on to the last fight on the card, which I believe should be a fight between Roosevelt Roberts versus Kamar Worthy. I couldn't find a better picture of Kamar Worthy. It's hard to find a good angle of that man. Either way, Kamar Worthy versus Roosevelt Roberts to finish off the early prelims. And look at that card. That's so doable, no? That's such a doable card. I've even picked guys coming off losses. You know what I mean? Like, these two coming off losses, these two coming off losses. Like, come on. You can pay these guys. This is a great card. Make this happen, and then you're fine. You're absolutely fine as a card. I will watch that pay-per-view illegally. I mean, I will pay for that pay-per-view all of the money that you're charging. Because $70, it's worth one night of fights. It really is. So I'll pay that because I'm dumb. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. That's the card for 265. Sean Shelby, give me a ring. You need some fucking real management in there because this is how you make a fucking card. Goodbye.